The airplane sat on the tarmac, its engines humming softly as passengers shuffled aboard. It was a typical commercial flight from Los Angeles to New York, one of dozens that took off every day. The cabin buzzed with the usual mix of sounds: people, chatting, children laughing, and the occasional announcement over the intercom. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisles, helping travelers find their seats and stow their carry-on bags. Laura Bennett stood near the front of the plane, her crisp uniform pressed and her hair neatly tied back in a bun. She had been working as a flight attendant for nearly 10 years, and she prided herself on keeping things running smoothly. Laura wasn't the warmest person on board, but she was efficient, always making sure everyone followed the rules. Sometimes, though, her patience wore thin, especially when dealing with difficult passengers or unruly kids. One such passenger was Emily Dawson, a bright-eyed 5-year-old with curly blonde hair and an endless supply of energy. Emily sat in seat 23B next to her mother, Rachel Dawson. Rachel was a kind woman in her early 30s, trying her best to keep her daughter entertained during the long journey ahead. They were traveling to New York to visit Rachel's sister, who had just given birth to twins. Emily loved babies and couldn't wait to meet her new cousins. Before boarding, they had spent some time with Jack Norris, Rachel's father and Emily's grandfather. Jack was a quiet man who preferred to stay out of the public eye these days. Few people knew that he used to be a famous action star and martial arts legend, better known by his stage name Chuck Norris. But now at 75 years old, he lived a simple life, enjoying time with his family and staying active. He doted on Emily, often teaching her funny karate moves and telling silly stories about his adventures. That morning, he had dropped them off at the airport, giving both Rachel and Emily big hugs before waving goodbye. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Emily grew restless. Sitting still for long periods wasn't easy for a child her age, and she began fidgeting in her seat. At first, it was small things, kicking her legs gently under the tray table or playing with the buckle on her seatbelt. But soon, her kicks started reaching farther, tapping lightly against the back of the seat in front of her. The passenger seated there, Stephen Carter, shifted uncomfortably. Stephen was a middle-aged businessman wearing a suit and tie, clearly focused on getting work done during the flight. After a few minutes of being disturbed, he turned around and gave Rachel a polite smile. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Could you maybe ask your daughter to stop kicking my seat? I'd really appreciate it." Rachel nodded quickly, apologizing profusely. "Of course, I'm so sorry. Emily, sweetie, please try to keep your feet down." Emily stopped, for a moment looking up at her mom with wide eyes. "But I'm bored," she whined quietly. "I know, honey," Rachel replied, pulling out a coloring book and some crayons from her bag. "Here, why don't you draw something fun while we wait?" For a little while, Emily seemed content, scribbling colorful pictures of rainbows and flowers. But as the minutes dragged on and the plane remained grounded, her attention span dwindled again. Without thinking, she resumed kicking the seat in front of her, this time with a bit more force. Stephen sighed audibly, rubbing his temples. He glanced toward the aisle, hoping someone might intervene. That's when Laura noticed the commotion. She had been checking that all passengers were buckled in and ready for departure, but the noise caught her attention. Walking briskly toward row 23, she fixed her gaze on Emily and Rachel. Her expression hardened as she approached. "Is there a problem here?" Laura asked, her tone clipped. Stephen looked up, relieved to see a flight attendant finally addressing the issue. "Yes, actually. This little girl keeps kicking my seat and it's becoming quite distracting." Laura turned to Rachel, expecting an explanation. "Ma'am, could you please make sure your daughter behaves appropriately? We need everyone to remain calm and seated until we're airborne." Rachel felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I've already told her to stop. She's just excited, I guess." But Laura didn't seem satisfied. Instead of addressing Rachel directly, she leaned closer to Emily, her face inches away from the child's. "Listen carefully," she said sternly. "If you don't stop kicking that seat right now, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" Emily blinked, startled by the sudden intensity of Laura's voice. For a brief moment she froze, unsure of what to do. Then, Almost instinctively, she kicked the seat one last time, harder than before. Without hesitation, Laura reacted. In a flash of anger, she reached out and slapped Emily's hand, delivering a sharp smack meant to shock the child into compliance. The sound echoed through the cabin, startling nearby passengers. Gasps rippled across the rows as everyone turned to see what had happened. Rachel's jaw dropped in disbelief. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, pulling Emily close to her, chest protectively. Tears welled up in the little girl's eyes as she buried her face against her mother's shoulder. Stephen, who had initially complained about the disturbance, now looked horrified. "Whoa, hey, that's not necessary," he muttered, sinking back into his seat. Laura immediately realized the weight of her actions. Her face paled as she stammered, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But Rachel wouldn't hear it. Clutching Emily tightly, she glared at Laura with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You hit my child," she snapped. "How dare you?" Why? Tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to speak up or stay silent. Some whispered among themselves, while others simply stared at Laura, waiting to see how she would handle the fallout. Unbeknownst to anyone aboard, Emily quietly whispered to her mom, "That lady is going to be in big trouble." Rachel shushed her gently, too upset to process the comment fully. Little did she know those words carried far more weight than she could imagine. Meanwhile, Laura retreated to the galley, her hands trembling as she replayed the scene in her mind. What had she done? How could she have let her frustration get the better of her like that? As the plane finally taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, she couldn't shake the feeling that this incident would haunt her for a long time to come. As the plane soared higher into the sky, the atmosphere in the cabin remained tense. Passengers tried to go about their usual routines, reading books, watching movies on their tablets, or chatting quietly with their seatmates, but the earlier incident lingered in everyone's minds. The sharp sound of Laura's slap and Rachel's angry voice still echoed faintly in the background, leaving an uncomfortable silence hanging over the rows. Rachel held Emily close, her arms wrapped protectively around her daughter. She could feel the little girl's small body trembling against hers, though Emily had stopped crying by now. Instead, she stared out the window, her wide eyes reflecting the endless expanse of clouds below. Rachel glanced down at her, brushing a strand of curly blonde hair away from her face. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Rachel asked softly, her voice filled with concern. Emily nodded but didn't say anything. After a pause, she whispered, "Mommy, that lady is mean." Rachel sighed, squeezing her hand gently. "Yes, she was wrong to do that, but don't worry. We'll make sure nothing like this happens again." Stephen Carter, seated in front of them, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He felt a pang of guilt for having complained about Emily kicking his seat earlier. At the time, it had seemed like a minor annoyance, but now he couldn't help but wonder if he had contributed to the situation spiraling out of control. He glanced back once, catching Rachel's eye, but quickly turned away when she shot him, a cold look. Meanwhile, Laura Bennett stood near the galley, gripping the edge of the counter tightly as she replayed the moment in her head. Her hands were still shaking and her stomach churned with regret. What had possessed her to react so harshly? She knew that slapping a child, no matter how frustrated she felt, was completely unacceptable. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was cruel. One of her co-workers, a younger flight attendant named Megan, approached cautiously. "Hey, are you okay?" Megan asked, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "I saw what happened back there. Do you want me to take over your section for a bit?" Laura hesitated before nodding. Yeah, maybe that would be best. I need a minute to calm down." Megan gave her a sympathetic smile and headed toward row 23, where Rachel and Emily were sitting. She knelt beside them, offering a polite apology on behalf of the airline. "I'm really sorry for what happened," she said sincerely. "If there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable, please let me know." Rachel forced herself to nod, though her expression remained guarded. "Thank you," she replied stiffly. "We'll be fine." When Megan returned to the galley, she reported back to Laura. "They're not happy, obviously, but they seem okay for now. Still, this isn't going to blow over easily." Laura groaned. covering her face with her hands. I messed up big. This could cost me my job. The rest of the flight passed in relative quiet. Rachel kept Emily occupied with snacks and games, doing her best to distract her from the earlier incident. Occasionally, Emily would glance toward the front of the plane, her lips pressed into a thin line. Though she didn't say much, Rachel could tell her daughter was processing what had happened in her own way. Finally, after hours in the air, the plane began its descent into New York. As the wheels touched down on the runway, Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her. She gathered their belongings quickly, eager to get off the plane and put as much distance between them and Laura as possible. When the seatbelt sign turned off, she stood up, holding Emily's hand firmly. "We're leaving now, okay?" Rachel said, leaning down to meet her daughter's gaze. "And we're never getting on a plane with that lady again." Emily nodded solemnly. "Okay, Mommy." As they made their way down the aisle, Rachel deliberately avoided looking at Laura, who stood near the exit door, her face pale and drawn. Several passengers whispered among themselves as they passed, some shooting disapproving glances in Laura's direction. One woman even muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "That poor kid. Someone should report her." By the time Rachel and Emily stepped off the plane and into the terminal, Rachel's anger had only grown stronger. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father's number without hesitation. Jack Norris answered on the second ring, his deep voice calm and steady. "Hey, sweetheart. How was your flight?" he asked cheerfully. Rachel took a deep breath, struggling to keep her emotions in check. "Dad, something terrible happened. A flight attendant slapped Emily because she kept kicking the seat in front of her. I'm so mad right now. I don't even know what to do." Jack's tone immediately shifted, becoming sharper and more serious. "What? Someone hit my granddaughter on purpose?" Rachel explained the entire situation, her voice breaking slightly as she recounted the details. Jack listened intently, his jaw tightening with each word. When she finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Where are you now?" Jack asked finally. "We just got off the plane," Rachel replied. "We're heading to baggage claim." "Stay there," Jack instructed firmly. "I'm coming to pick you up." "But Dad, you live 2 hours away," Rachel protested. "You don't have to." "I said I'm coming," Jack interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And don't worry, this isn't over yet." Rachel hung up, feeling a mix of gratitude and apprehension. She knew her father well enough to understand that he wouldn't let this slide. Jack Norris might have retired from the spotlight years ago, but he still carried the same fierce sense of justice that had defined his career. If anyone could handle this situation, it was him. While Rachel waited for her father, Laura retreated to the staff lounge at the airport, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Would Rachel file a formal complaint? Would she lose her job? The thought of being fired terrified her, not just because of the financial implications, but because flying had been her passion for so long. She loved meeting new people and exploring different parts of the world, even if the job came with its challenges. Her coworker Megan joined her in the lounge, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "Here," she said, handing one to Laura. "You look like you need this." "Thanks," Laura murmured, taking a sip. I can't believe I did that. I've never lost control like that before." "It happens," Megan said gently. "We all have bad days, but you'll figure it out. Just try to stay calm and deal with whatever comes next." Laura nodded, though she wasn't convinced. Staying calm sounded impossible when her future felt so uncertain. Back in the terminal, Rachel spotted her father walking toward her, his tall frame cutting through the crowd effortlessly. Despite his age, Jack moved with the same confident stride that had made him famous decades ago. His piercing blue eyes scanned the area until they landed on Rachel and Emily. Without hesitation, he hurried over, pulling them both into a tight hug. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking first at Rachel and then at Emily. "Did she hurt you, sweetheart?" Emily shook her head, clutching her grandfather's hand. "No, Grandpa, but she scared me." Jack's expression darkened, his protective instincts kicking into high gear. "Don't worry," he said, his voice softening. "Grandpa's here now. No one's going to scare you again." Rachel sighed, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Having her father by her side always made her feel safer, like nothing could truly go wrong while he was around. But she also knew that Jack's involvement meant things were about to get serious, and possibly messy, for the flight attendant who had crossed the wrong family. Jack Norris didn't waste any time. After greeting Rachel and Emily at the airport, he listened carefully as they recounted every detail of the incident on the plane. His face remained calm, but his eyes burned with quiet intensity. He asked questions to clarify what had happened, how the flight attendant reacted, whether other passengers stepped in, and how Emily felt during and after the event. Rachel answered as best she could, her voice still tinged with anger and frustration. Emily chimed in occasionally, describing the slap as really loud, and saying that it made her feel sad and scared. Jack nodded thoughtfully, running a hand through his silver hair. When they finished, he looked at Rachel and said, "I'll take care of this. You focus on getting settled. Don't worry about anything else." Rachel hesitated. "Dad, I don't want you to do anything drastic. Just maybe talk to her or something. Make sure she knows this isn't okay." Jack gave her a reassuring smile. "I'll handle it my way. Trust me." With that, he left them at the baggage claim area and headed toward the exit. Jack climbed into his car, a sleek black sedan, and pulled out his phone. Using some old connections from his days in Hollywood, he managed to track down Laura Bennett's address within an hour. It wasn't difficult for someone like him. Over the years, he'd built a network of people who owed him favors. By late afternoon, he was driving through the quiet streets of a suburban neighborhood, searching for the right house. When Jackie arrived at Laura's modest apartment building, he parked across the street and sat there for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He wasn't planning to storm in and cause trouble. That wasn't his style. But he needed to make sure Laura understood the seriousness of her actions, not just for Emily's sake, but for her own future. Taking a deep breath, Jack stepped out of the car and walked up to the front door of the building. He pressed the buzzer labeled Bennett, waiting patiently. A few seconds later, a shaky voice came through the intercom. "Hello? It's Jack Norris," he said simply. "We need to talk." There was a long pause before Laura buzzed him in. Jack climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment and found her standing in the doorway, her face pale and wide-eyed with shock. She clearly hadn't expected anyone like him to show up. "Mr. Norris?" she stammered, stepping aside to let him in. "What are you doing here?" Jack entered the small living room, taking note of the neat but sparsely furnished space. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You know why I'm here," he said evenly. "My granddaughter told me what happened on the plane. Care to explain yourself?" Laura swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir, I don't know what to say. I messed up. I completely lost control, and I regret it more than anything. Hitting a child, it's unforgivable. I know that." Jack studied her for a moment, his sharp gaze piercing through her defenses. "Do you have kids of your own?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, sir, I don't." "Then let me tell you something," Jack continued, his tone firm but not angry. "Kids aren't always easy to deal with. They get restless, they act out, it's part of growing up. But no matter how frustrated you get, you never lay a hand on them, ever. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Laura whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand." Jack nodded slowly. "Good. Because if you ever touch another child like that again, I won't be so understanding next time." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Laura sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. "I swear, Mr. Norris, I didn't mean to hurt her. I just snapped. I've been under a lot of stress lately, and I let it get the better of me." Jack softened slightly, recognizing genuine remorse when he saw it. He sat down across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Look, I'm not here to ruin your life. What's done is done. But you need to make things right. For Emily, for her mom, and for yourself. If you're truly sorry, you'll find a way to fix this. Laura wiped her eyes, looking up at him hopefully. How can I do that? Tell me what to do. Jack thought for a moment before answering. Write an apology letter, to Emily specifically. Be honest about what you did and why it was wrong, and then volunteer your time mentoring children. Maybe teach them about airplanes or help them overcome their fear of flying. Show them kindness instead of anger. If you commit to that, I won't press charges or report you to the airline. Relief flooded Laura's face. Thank you, Mr. Norris. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise. Satisfied, Jack stood up. I'll hold you to that. Keep your word, and we won't have any problems. But remember, one mistake doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. As he walked out of the apartment, Laura watched him go, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and determination. For the first time since the incident, she felt like she had a chance to redeem herself. Later that evening, Jack returned home to check on Rachel and Emily. They were staying at his house for the weekend, enjoying the peaceful surroundings of his countryside property. When he walked in, Emily ran up to him, her curly blonde hair bouncing as she hugged his legs tightly. Did you scare the mean lady, Grandpa? She asked eagerly. Jack chuckled, crouching down to her level. No, sweetheart. We had a grown-up talk. She knows she made a big mistake and she's going to try to make things better. Emily tilted her head, considering this. Will she say sorry? She will, Jack assured her. And if she doesn't, we'll figure something else out. But for now, let's give her a chance to do the right thing. Rachel, who had been listening from the kitchen, joined them with a grateful smile. Thanks, Dad. I know Emily feels safer knowing you're handling it. Jack stood up, wrapping an arm around Rachel's shoulders. That's what I'm here for. Family comes first. Always. Over dinner, the three of them talked about lighter topics, leaving behind the tension of earlier in the day. Jack shared stories from his acting days, making Emily giggle with tales of ridiculous stunts and funny mishaps on set. By the end of the meal, the little girl seemed to have forgotten all about the unpleasant encounter on the plane. But Jack hadn't forgotten. As he tucked Emily into bed that night, he reminded her gently, If anyone ever treats you badly, you come straight to me or your mom, okay? No one gets to hurt my grandbaby. Emily nodded sleepily, clutching her stuffed bear. Okay, Grandpa. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart, Jack murmured, kissing her forehead before turning off the light. Back downstairs, Rachel poured herself a cup of tea and sat beside her father on the couch. You really think she'll change? Rachel asked, quietly. Jack sipped his coffee, staring into the fireplace. I think she wants to. Whether she follows through remains to be seen, but sometimes people just need a push in the right direction. Rachel nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. I'm glad you're here, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you. Jack smiled, patting her hand. You'd manage just fine. You're strong, kiddo. Always have been. They sat together in comfortable silence, the crackling fire filling the room with warmth. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the last traces of the day's troubles. Now everything felt calm, and that was enough. The next morning, Laura woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Jack Norris's visit had shaken her to her core, but it also gave her clarity. She realized that the stress and frustration she'd been carrying for so long had clouded her judgment. It wasn't an excuse for what she had done, it was a reason to change. She started by sitting at her kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and a pen. Writing the apology letter felt harder than she expected. How could she possibly express how sorry she was? Her hands trembled as she began, her words hesitant at first. But as she wrote, her thoughts became clearer. She explained what had happened on the plane, admitted her mistake, and promised to do better. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face. For the first time, she truly understood the weight of her actions, not just on Emily, but on herself. When the letter was ready, Laura folded it neatly and placed it in an envelope. She didn't know when or how she would deliver it, but she knew it was a step in the right direction. Next, she decided to follow through on Jack's suggestion about volunteering. She called a local community center and asked if they needed help running programs for children. The woman on the phone sounded surprised but grateful, telling Laura there was always room for more volunteers. That evening, Laura drove to the community center for an orientation meeting. As she walked inside, she felt nervous. Would people recognize her? Would they judge her for what she had done? She pushed those thoughts aside, reminding herself why she was there. This wasn't about her. It was about making amends. The director of the center, a kind woman named Patricia, greeted Laura warmly and introduced her to the other volunteers. Most of them were teenagers or young adults eager to help kids learn new skills. Laura explained that she worked as a flight attendant and offered to teach children about airplanes and air travel. Patricia loved the idea, assigning her to lead a small group session the following Saturday. On Saturday morning, Laura arrived at the community center early, setting up chairs and arranging colorful posters of airplanes around the room. She brought props, model planes, maps, and even a pilot's uniform she borrowed from a friend at work. When the children began to trickle in, accompanied by their parents, Laura greeted each one with a warm smile. There were about 10 kids in total, ranging in age from 5 to 10. Among them was Emily Dawson. Rachel had hesitated before bringing Emily to the session. Part of her wanted to shield her daughter from any reminder of the incident, but she also trusted Jack's judgment. If Laura was willing to put in the effort to make things right, then maybe this was a chance for healing, for everyone involved. When Emily walked into the room, Laura froze for a moment. Her stomach tightened as she saw the little girl who had unknowingly changed her life. Emily looked different now, calmer, quieter, but her wide eyes still held a spark of curiosity. Rachel stayed close by, watching carefully. Laura took a deep breath and approached them. "Hi," she said softly, addressing Rachel first. "Thank you for coming." Rachel nodded stiffly, keeping her arms crossed. "We'll see how it goes." Then Laura turned to Emily, kneeling down to meet her eye level. "Emily, I owe you an apology. I wrote you a letter, but I want to say it out loud too." She pulled the envelope from her bag and handed it to Emily. "I'm really sorry for what I did on the plane. It was wrong, and I feel terrible about it. I hope someday you can forgive me." Emily stared at the envelope, then glanced up at her mom. Rachel gave her a gentle nod. "It's okay, sweetie. You can open it later." Emily accepted the letter without saying anything, clutching it tightly in her hands. Laura stood up, offering a tentative smile. "Ready to learn about airplanes?" Despite the tension, the session went surprisingly well. Laura spoke passionately about her job, showing the kids how pilots navigate using instruments and explaining the science behind flight. She let them try on the pilot's hat and sit in a mock cockpit she had set up with cardboard boxes. Emily participated quietly, her initial hesitation fading as she became absorbed in the activities. By the end of the session, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The children laughed and chattered excitedly, sharing what they had learned. Even Rachel seemed less guarded, though she kept a watchful eye on Emily. As the families prepared to leave, Laura approached them again. "Emily," she said gently, "I meant everything I said earlier. Thank you for giving me another chance." Emily looked up at her, her expression thoughtful. After a pause, she whispered, "Okay, it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start." Rachel placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, giving Laura a brief nod of acknowledgement. "Thank you for doing this," she said quietly. "It means a lot." As they walked away, Laura watched them go, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. She knew she still had a long way to go, but today felt like progress. Later that week, Laura returned to work. Her co-workers noticed a difference in her demeanor. She seemed calmer, more patient, and genuinely interested in helping passengers. During one particularly chaotic flight, a toddler threw a tantrum in the aisle, screaming and flailing his arms. Instead of snapping, Laura knelt beside him, speaking softly and offering him a small toy from her pocket. Within minutes, the boy calmed down, much to the relief of his exhausted parents. Megan noticed the change and smiled. "You're really turning things around," she said during a break in the galley. Laura shrugged modestly. "I'm trying. I think I needed this wake-up call." Word of Laura's efforts spread quickly among the staff. Even some of the regular passengers commented on how pleasant she was. Though she knew she couldn't erase what had happened, she hoped her actions would speak louder than her mistakes. One day, while scrolling through social media during her lunch break, Laura came across a photo posted by Rachel. It showed Emily, holding the letter Laura had written, smiling brightly as she posed next to a model airplane. The caption read, "Forgiveness is powerful. Thanks to Laura for taking responsibility and making things right." Tears filled Laura's eyes as she stared at the picture. She hadn't expected such kindness from Rachel, or from anyone else involved. But it reminded her why she had chosen this path in the first place. Flying wasn't just about transporting people from one place to another. It was about connecting them, creating moments of joy and understanding. That night, Laura sat alone in her apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about Emily's smile, Rachel's forgiveness, and Jack Norris's quiet strength. They had all taught her something valuable, that no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back up. With renewed determination, Laura picked up her journal and began writing again. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was a promise to herself, a promise to keep learning, growing, and becoming someone worthy of the second chance she'd been given. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, casting a soft glow through her window. For the first time in weeks, Laura felt hopeful. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them, with patience, humility, and a heart full of gratitude. Months passed, and Laura's life began to settle into a new rhythm. The changes she had made weren't just about fixing her mistakes. They were about becoming a better version of herself. Every Saturday, she returned to the community center, leading sessions for children who dreamed of flying or simply wanted to understand airplanes. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and soon the kids started calling her Miss Laura. They loved her stories about traveling around the world, and she found joy in their wide-eyed curiosity. Emily became a regular at these sessions, always sitting near the front with a bright smile on her face. At first, Rachel stayed close by, keeping a watchful eye on Laura. But over time, she relaxed, trusting that Laura's transformation was genuine. Emily even began asking questions during the lessons, raising her hand eagerly to share what she had learned. One day, she proudly announced to the group, "Did you know planes can fly higher than birds, Miss Laura told me?" Laura couldn't help but beam with pride. Seeing Emily so happy, and knowing she had played a small part in it, filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Jack Norris kept tabs on the situation from afar. He didn't interfere directly after his initial visit to Laura's apartment, but he occasionally checked in with Rachel to see how things were going. When Rachel mentioned that Emily seemed to enjoy the community center sessions, Jack nodded approvingly. "She's doing good work," he said one evening during a phone call. "I think we gave her the push she needed." Rachel agreed. "Yeah, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad we didn't press charges. She's really trying to make things right." Jack chuckled softly. Sometimes people just need a chance to prove themselves. Laura's learning that actions have consequences, but also that kindness can heal. As winter approached, the community center organized a holiday event for the children and their families. Laura volunteered to help decorate the hall and plan activities. She worked tirelessly alongside Patricia and the other volunteers, transforming the space into a festive wonderland filled with twinkling lights, colorful streamers, and tables, laden with snacks and crafts. On the day of the event, parents and kids poured into the hall, laughing and chatting as they explored the various stations. Laura ran a booth where children could design paper airplanes and test them in a makeshift flight zone, made of cardboard tunnels and hoops. Emily was among the first to arrive, clutching a stack of construction paper and markers. "Can I make a red plane?" she asked, plopping down at the table. Of course, Laura replied with a grin. Red is the fastest color. Emily giggled, carefully folding her paper into the shape of an airplane. When she finished, she held it up triumphantly. Look, it's ready. Together, they launched the plane across the room, cheering as it soared through the air before landing gently on the floor. Other kids joined in, creating their own designs and testing them out. The sound of laughter echoed through the hall, filling Laura with warmth. Later that afternoon, Jack arrived unexpectedly, accompanied by Rachel and Emily. He had driven down to attend the event, curious to see firsthand how things were progressing. When he entered the hall, his eyes scanned the room until they landed on Laura, crouched beside a group of children as they experimented with different wing shapes. Jack smiled faintly, nodding to himself. He walked over to the booth, catching Laura's attention. Looks like you've got quite the operation going here, he remarked, his tone light but approving. Laura stood up, brushing stray bits of paper off her jeans. Mr. Norris, I didn't expect to see you here. I thought I'd stop by, Jack said. See how things are coming along. Looks like you're doing a great job. Laura blushed slightly, glancing at the kids around her. It's been rewarding, more than I ever imagined. Jack turned to Emily, who was busy decorating another plane with glitter and stickers. And what about you, kiddo? Are you having fun? Emily looked up, beaming. Yes. Miss Laura taught me how to make my plane go super far. Jack chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. Well, that's impressive. Maybe someday you'll be a pilot. Emily's eyes sparkled at the idea. Maybe. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew even livelier. Families gathered for a group photo near the decorated Christmas tree, and Laura found herself standing next to Rachel and Emily. For a moment, they all posed together, smiling for the camera. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes about how far they had come since that fateful flight. After the event ended, Jack pulled Laura aside while Rachel helped Emily pack up her creations. You've done well, he said quietly. I'm proud of you. Laura blinked, surprised by the unexpected praise. Thank you, Mr. Norris. That means a lot. Jack nodded. Just remember, this is only the beginning. Keep being kind, keep working hard, and don't forget why you started down this path. I won't, Laura promised. I owe you more than I can say. Jack waved a hand dismissively. You don't owe me anything. You did the hard work. All I did was give you a nudge. With that, he rejoined Rachel and Emily, leaving Laura to reflect on his words. As she cleaned up the booth, she realized how much her life had changed in such a short time. What had once felt like a career-ending disaster had become an opportunity for growth, not just professionally, but personally. A few weeks later, Laura received a letter in the mail. At first glance, it appeared to be a formal document, but when she opened it, she discovered it was a handwritten note from Rachel. The words were simple but heartfelt. Dear Laura, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. Emily talks about you all the time now, and it's clear how much she admires you. You've shown us that people can change when they truly want to. Keep following your heart. It's leading you in the right direction. Take care, Rachel. Laura read the note several times, tears streaming down her face. She tucked it into her journal next to the promises she had written to herself months earlier. Each word served as a reminder of how far she had come, and how much farther she could go if she stayed true to her values. In the months that followed, Laura continued to grow both personally and professionally. Her coworkers noticed the positive impact she had on passengers, and she was eventually promoted to lead flight attendant on her route. The airline recognized her efforts to mentor young children, featuring her story in their internal newsletter. Though she remained humble about the attention, Laura couldn't deny the sense of fulfillment she felt every time someone thanked her for making their journey smoother, or for inspiring their child to dream big. One spring afternoon, as Laura boarded yet another flight, she paused for a moment to take in the scene. Passengers shuffled aboard, some weary from travel, others excited for new adventures. Children peeked curiously out the windows, pointing at the planes lined up on the tarmac. It was a familiar sight, but today it felt different. Brighter. Somehow, she remembered Jack's advice. Kindness can heal. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers whose lives she would touch in small but meaningful ways, Laura knew he was right. Flying wasn't just about reaching destinations. It was about connecting people, bridging gaps, and finding beauty in the journey itself. As the plane lifted off the ground, soaring higher and higher into the sky, Laura smiled. Somewhere below, Emily Dawson was probably drawing pictures of airplanes, dreaming of the day she'd fly one herself. And somewhere else, Jack Norris watched the horizon, satisfied that justice had been served, not through anger or revenge, but through understanding and forgiveness. The world was vast, full of challenges and opportunities alike. But for Laura, the future no longer felt daunting. Instead, it stretched out before her like an endless runway, waiting for her to take flight.